What's up guys, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be checking out a really interesting knife from a company that I've always found to be a little bit weird. That company is Atropos knife and they're from Russia. These knives are pretty cool, but one of them I'm going to be keeping and putting into my own personal collection, and the other one is going straight back to Mother Russia. So let's go ahead and jump into this and figure out what's good and what's bad about these things. One thing that's important to note about Atropos is that they actually name all of their knives based off of the blade style, not the handles of the knife. So while this knife may look like a demon, the demon is actually just a blade style. This is a Karot blade style, and this one is also a Karot. So both of these are the same blade style of knife, but they have very different internals, and we're gonna go over that now. First, we're going to talk about the titanium channel version of the knife. Now, this knife is really interesting. It has a 4.5 ounce weight without the latch. It has 4 inches of usable blade length and 5.5 inch titanium channel handles. It runs on bushings and washers, and the blade steel is D2. Also, it uses Zen pins instead of Tang pins, which I find to be really nice, and the Zen pins are really well done. Now, you can get this knife in either Zen pins or Tang pins, but I definitely suggest going with the Zen pins, even if they're a little bit weird, which we'll talk about later. Now onto the G10 sandwich version of the Karot. So this one is a little bit lighter than the last one at 4.3 ounces without the latch. Now this knife is sandwich construction with G10 scales and titanium liners. It also has brass spacers in the bottom to add a little bit of extra weight to the handles. Other than that though, all the measurements of the handles and the fact that it runs on bushings and Zen pins are all exactly the same. So even though the actual specifications are very similar to the previous knife, it does flip very differently, which we'll get to. Now that we finished talking about the specs of these knives, let's go ahead and get into the weird stuff. Now, coming from Russia, if their taste in music is any indication, these are gonna be a little bit quirky, so we should probably cover that. So when it comes to strangeness, I have all of it right here. There's a bag of strangeness right there, and a bunch of random strangeness right there. These knives are weird, and I have a few reasons behind saying that. First of all, they use security Torx in the Zen pins. I actually had to go out and buy myself an entirely new set of Torx bits so that I could access the Zen pin screws and adjust them, which is very weird. I've never seen somebody using security Torx and regular Torx on one knife before. But that doesn't even cover the weirdness, because when you get into the latch, it's a piece of steel, it weighs like 7 tons, and the cap on the end of the latch is brass. You can just unscrew it and you have a little brass cap. It's like another kind of screw. This knife has like 7 screws on it. On the rock texture G10 knife, it actually came with a pocket clip. The pocket clip weighs less than the latch, which is weird because it's more steel than the latch, but whatever. But the way that it was attached to the knife was very strange. The pocket clip was attached with hex screws. This knife had 3 different kinds of screws on it. It had regular Torx, security Torx, and hex screws holding in the pocket clip. What's up with that? Is it random or does it take planning? Because you either have a bunch of random hardware that you're adding into your knife, or you had to plan that out, where you were like, oh yeah, I'm gonna use regular screws, and then I'm gonna use security Torx, and then I'm gonna use hex screws too, and then there'll be another screw inside the latch? That takes a lot of planning for such a weird quirk. Why would you do that? Why? I had a lot of that while I was working on these knives. Every single thing I was like, why? Why would you do that? Why would you have brass spacers when you could just, you know, take less material out of the liners? You could just, you don't need the brass spacers. You could just, speaking of kind of strange stuff, let's go ahead and talk about the unboxing experience of this knife. It comes in a, you know, relatively standard cardboard box. However, it does also come with a Atropos knife fridge magnet, which is cool, but also, why would you give me a fridge magnet? You know what I can't do? I can't put a fridge magnet on my Pelican case. It doesn't work. Like, it's not like I'm gonna open this box and be like,
holy fuck, is that a fridge magnet?
Please, Atropos, if you're watching this, I think this is cute, please give me a sticker. Now, even with all that strangeness, the real question is, how do they flip? And honestly, neither of them flips badly. They're both really good performers. They just flip differently. So the titanium channel one is a very neutral flipper, in my opinion. Out of all the knives I've flipped, it flips the most similar to probably a Benchmade 42. It just feels relatively solid, but also very light. If you like the 42, you would really like the way this one flips. Now, when we get into the G10 version, that one is a little more handle biased. I wouldn't call it handle heavy. It's really just a slight bit more biased to the handle, and I think that has to do with the brass spacers that were used. Even though the knife is lighter, there is more weight at the end of the handle, and so it flips differently because of that. Now, the grip type of the channel design Balisong is just a hole pattern, and that hole pattern is actually really good in the hand. It feels really good while you're flipping, and it gives you the proper amount of grip for all different kinds of tricks, including things like fanning, and it's really, really good for choker fan. The thing that aids the most in choker fanning is definitely the roundness of the handles. These handles feel really good weight-wise and have a perfect roundness to them, so you can fan really, really easily with this knife. The grip type of the G10 knife is this intricate rock pattern, which I think is very, very good and looks really, really pretty. However, when it comes to actually holding it, it's kind of weird. Have you ever just touched something and it felt kind of wrong? This is like that. It's softer feeling than you'd probably expect from looking at it. It definitely feels very soft in the hand, and it gives you a good amount of grip, but I honestly would have preferred some kind of hole pattern to it to really give me that extra grip while I'm trying to do fanning. The other thing is that the handles of this knife are much thicker than the titanium variant, and that leads to some interesting problems. The titanium variant is really good because the handles are round enough that fanning works really well. The G10 version of this knife, the handles are just a little bit too thick for fanning to work properly. Like, you can do it and it'll work just fine, but if you're trying to get a continuous fan going, it can be a little bit difficult because of the thickness of the handles. If you like a more handle biased knife, maybe go for this one, but honestly for me, I really like the neutral balance of the titanium channel. Now, if you're gonna flip these knives, I definitely recommend getting rid of the latch immediately. The latch weighs 0.21 ounces, and if you put that much weight on one handle and not on the other, you're gonna have a really weird time while you're flipping the knife. So definitely get rid of that latch immediately. You might have to use a hammer, but it's worth it. By the way, you have to use a hammer to get rid of the latch.
Really?
One thing that I did notice while flipping these knives is that the actual Zen cups themselves are a little bit rough. I honestly wish that they had been ground down a little bit. You could probably fix this yourself with a little bit of sandpaper, but as you're doing things like chaplains, you will find that it rubs a lot on your finger. Now, one thing that's important to mention is that even though these knives are both great flippers, they're also fantastic EDC knives. The blades on these knives are super sturdy and are really sharp, which is fantastic for EDC. Honestly, the titanium version of this knife I would carry around every single day if I was working in a warehouse needing to open boxes, or if I had anything that I needed a knife actively on the job. This is a fantastic knife for that. Honestly, this is probably my top recommendation when it comes for a knife that you can spend under $300 on as an EDC. There's not too much to worry about because it is just solid titanium handles and very few screws, and so you can just carry this with you and it'll work and be a genuinely good knife to use. So at the end of the day, it comes down to whether or not I would recommend these knives. And honestly, I would recommend both, though I definitely prefer the titanium channel version over the G10. The reason for that is for $210, the G10 one stacks up to be exactly what I'd expect for $210. It's a really nice knife, but it's not incredible. For $245, which is not much more than the G10 one, the titanium channel version is much more than that. Honestly, I think this knife could go for at least $500 and still be a nice deal. This knife is a really good EDC. The blade steel is really nice. The blade itself is very hefty and strong. The knife handles are perfect and balanced, and everything about it really just speaks to me. I really like this knife and I'm gonna be keeping it. This knife, on the other hand, I am gonna be sending back to Atropos. So even though I enjoyed both of them, this is the one I suggest. All right, that's pretty much it for this video. I definitely want to thank Atropos for sending me these 2 knives. I really enjoyed getting to review them. I also want to thank my viewers. You guys requested me to actually do this review, and so that makes me really happy. If you have any other knives you would like me to review, definitely leave a comment down below and I'll get to it. Also, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming Crack-A-Rackin' review from Squid Industries. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go ahead and do nothing with this fridge magnet.